Johnny Carson was a famous talk show host from the United States during the 60s right up to the 90s. And once he was interviewing an 8-year-old boy one night. The young man was asked to appear on the show because he had rescued 2 friends from a coal mine outside his hometown in West Virginia. As Johnny chatted with him, it became apparent that the boy was a Christian. Johnny asked him if he attended Sunday school. And when the boy said he did, Johnny inquired, "What are you learning in Sunday school?" "Last week," the boy replied, "our lesson was about how Jesus went to a wedding and turned water into wine." So the audience burst into laughter and applause at that. And keeping a straight face, Johnny asked, "And what did you learn from that story?" The boy squirmed in his chair. It was apparent he hadn't thought about this. But then he lifted up his face and said, "If you're going to have a wedding, make sure you invite Jesus and Mary." And that is precisely the message of today's gospel. Make sure you invite Jesus and Mary wherever you live and wherever you go. In other words, today's gospel lesson is about the sufficiency of Jesus in our lives, the power of Jesus' mother's intercession. The readings from Isaiah and John in the gospel both refer to marriage. They fit hand in glove. Isaiah is talking to a people in exile. Israel had been devastated because they didn't trust God to care for them, so they broke their covenant with God and made bad political alliances with pagan nations against the Babylonians. So the Babylonians invaded and destroyed Jerusalem, and then they took the leaders, artists, and craftspeople into exile, leaving the poorest, the most fragile behind. It was common practice. Take the heart of the nation into slavery, away from their beloved land, their homeland. Break their spirit. Today, we would look at the political situation in Israel during the time of Isaiah, and we'd see it with a different perspective. I think we probably would say, God could do better than get involved in human affairs. Just look where that leads. God should keep a distance. Just be satisfied being creator, even though that would have its frustrations as well. Maybe God could be our judge, come back at the end to pass judgment on how we did. An attitude like that would certainly reduce the feelings of betrayal and the number of times God might say to Israel and to us as well, "How could you?" But God seems blinded by love for us. And what a risky love that is. Someone could say about God's loving relationship with our humans, it will never last. Humans are too fickle. They go off and do their own thing, and again and again and again. They're like exiles in a foreign land. Maybe God could use what some of us have had, a wise elder, to tell God, "You're going to have your heart broken again and again. Is it worth it? Just give up on them." But the prophet Isaiah speaks on God's behalf today to exiles, broken, dispirited in a foreign country. And the prophet remembers the derogatory names people called the exiles. They were called forsaken, desolate. But just as married couples have pet names for one another, the prophet says God will have new names for Israel. No longer forsaken, no longer desolate. And God, like an ancient bridegroom, is going to claim a spouse who has been living far away. And so Isaiah is reminding us that God doesn't give up on us when we go wandering when we make foolish choices, when our excuse me, when our faith loses its enthusiasm. But God's passion for us doesn't cool down, despite our foolish and sinful ways. God keeps coming back to us with forgiveness, and God keeps seeking intimacy with us humans, really to save us from ourselves, to fetch us back from whatever exile we have wandered off into. We do mess things up. Certainly, Israel messed things up over and over again, even killing the prophets God had sent to help them. But God can't be shaken off easily. How do we know? Because Jesus arrives at a wedding feast in Cana. And this isn't just a wedding of an unknown couple in a small village whose location is lost in history. Jesus' presence at the wedding and what he does there announces that the long-awaited Messiah has arrived. The bridegroom has come to claim his bride. Jesus is the host at the banquet. He provides a superabundance of wine, over 500 liters of wine. That's roughly what the 6-stone jars would mean, 500 liters approximately. And it is as the prophets promised. God is an extravagant lover, and at the end time would provide a banquet with plenty of food, choice, rich wine. And that superabundance of wine is a symbol for us. We might have traveled a long distance or a short one, or be on our own, gone into exile from God. But we have returned to this wedding feast to again meet our God, the daring and persistent lover God, a God who doesn't give up on us, a God always welcoming us back, a God who always offers us a new beginning, again and again, a God who calls us my delight. Try that name on for size, just for today, hopefully for a lifetime. God calls us my delight. And no matter what happens, and no matter what standards we use to measure ourselves, we can hear God's loving voice calling out to us, my delight. I know that by our usual standards of measurement that doesn't make much sense. Why would the Supreme Being call us my delight? But in Jesus, God does call us my delight. And what a compliment that is to our sense of self. And the consequence is that it allows us to be in relationship with God. And God also reaches out to our neighbor with the same love that we have received. And so today we too are called to show respect and dignity and honor to our neighbor.